Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We had stopped with the chapter of rentals, and we had spoken about some of the masail with regards to, for example, charging extra to do the job fast. And we mentioned that the Hanafi madhab, they allow you to do that because it's too, or I would say, according to the Imam in the madhab, that type of contract is allowed because a person is presented with two offers. Inshallah, today we move on to some masail when it comes to hiring and rentals that are mentioned by some of the ulama. Why do they mention them? Because people may think that they're not permissible and they're actually allowed, or a person may think that it is permissible but it's not allowed. So that's what they mention, and inshallah, we'll go through them. Hanafi madhab, when beginning this sub-chapter in the book, they say that it's permissible, okay? It's permissible for a person to take ujra meaning a service fee, or to pay somebody to do cupping for you. It's known as a hajjam. Sorry, that's there. Ha and jim, alif and mim. Hajjam is somebody who cups. So cupping, where you take out the blood. Why do they mention this, even though the Messenger ﷺ himself had cupping done? Because in some ahadith, it's mentioned that the Messenger ﷺ said, Kasbul hajjami khabith, which basically means the earning of the one who does cupping is khabith, which means it's dirty or impure. So a person may think, because of that hadith, that you're not allowed to have an occupation, for example, as somebody who cups and charges people. So here, in order to show its permissibility, they mention that mas'ala, and the Messenger ﷺ himself, on one occasion, he paid for cupping. Okay, and when it comes to responding to the hadith of Kasbul Hajjam, some say, some dispute the authenticity. Others mention that is referring to the fact that it's a dirty profession, in the sense that there's a lot of blood and that involved. And as you know, in the olden days, the way the people used to cup, or some people used to cup, is they would suck. Okay, let's say they would suck, or they would use the today we have cups which we put on, and then they would use the something sharp, for example, to open. So some say because of that. Wallahu alam, Allah knows what is the correct reasoning. However, we'll tell you it's permissible to take a fee, or to charge somebody if you're doing cupping for them, or it's permissible for you to pay for cupping. That's number one. Number two, they say the ujrah, or the rental for the hammam. Hammam here is referring to, in our terms, the sauna. Okay, what you've got to remember is that in the Arabian Peninsula, it's very hot, and as the Muslims went further and further, and they got to the colder countries, they found what's known as hammam. Hammam is, as I mentioned, a sauna in our terms. Why do the colder countries have a sauna? So the people can sweat, because in the cold countries, when you don't sweat, the body holds in toxins, etc. So in order for a person to expel the toxins from the body, they've got no heat. They can't sweat. So they would have this type of sauna. So as long as it's not haram, in the sense that no other haram is going on in that sauna, you're allowed to take, or you're allowed to pay for it, and you're allowed to go to it. And in the olden days, you've got to remember that in similar to today, there's some saunas that a person may go to which are, we'll say, Islamically compliant in terms of dress, in terms of what goes on inside, etc. And there's some which are not. So later on, you find towards 500, 600, 700 Hijri, some of the scholars disliked for a person to go into those saunas. Why? Because of the environment, not the actual treatment, because of the environment that would be there. So here they're telling you that as long as everything else is permissible, then it's permissible to take ujrah or fee for it. Thereafter, they move on to what's not allowed to take a fee or a salary for. They say that number one, you're not allowed what's called asbut taste, which literally means those who had animals. Let's say if you had a stallion or you had a bull, when it comes to cows, you had a male. Well, if there's a good lineage or people wanted to reproduce and increase their animals, Islamically, you are not or you're not supposed to charge somebody to take your bull or your stallion in order to mate with, let's say, the horse, etc., the mare. And this is according to most of the madhahib, and they use the hadith where the Messenger ﷺ prohibited that. There's only one opinion in the Shafi'i madhab that says that the way to come out of that, why, or if you look at it, why is the prohibition? Number one, some say is you are supposed to help your fellow Muslim or your fellow brother. You've got the animal, allow it to mate with the other animal and let them reproduce. You're not supposed to charge for it. So that's one reason they mention. The second reason they mention is you charging for something that may happen or may not happen. So female animal may become pregnant or may not. So you're charging for something which is majhul, which is not present. So they say that's not allowed. There's one way or one opinion, I'm sure in the Shafi madhab, that say that instead of charging according to how many times the animal mate, for example, rather hire the animal. So say, you know what, I want to hire your stallion for a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it may be. That's like a makhraj or a hila that they use. And when you look at horse racing, for example, today, that's where all the money is made, because you've got horses which race fast, and then you've got a superior pedigree, superior lineage, and then they only want to breed those horses similar to the cows and similar to other animals. And you find the ones that have the weaker lineage, they don't breed them and they charge for it. There's a lot of money, the hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars in order for that. So they say Islamically you're not supposed to. And as I mentioned, there's some who found a makhraj or a hila to come out of that. Wallahu a'lam. Then they say number two, a person is not allowed to take a fee for making adhan. When you make adhan, it's an act of worship. So basically they're saying that certain acts of worship you're not allowed to take a fee for. Number one is adhan. Okay. Number two is you're not allowed to take a fee for imama if you're an imam in the masjid. Okay. Number three, they tell you you're not allowed to take a fee if you perform hajj on somebody else's behalf. Number four, you're not allowed to take a fee for teaching the Quran. The Hanafi madhab, they'll tell you also you're not allowed to take a fee for teaching fiqh. They specifically mention fiqh and Islamic studies. Now you'll find that this was the opinion of the older scholars, meaning the previous generation. Why did they have that opinion? Or where are these mu'adhins or imams supposed to live off? In those days, you had what was called the Baytul Mal. Baytul Mal is, you could say, the Islamic treasury. And the Islamic treasury would look after these people. So they would give the imam something. It's not necessarily a wage. It was called a razq. They give the imam, the mu'adhin, somebody teaching, etc. And that's why they didn't allow a person to take a fee for this. They use some hadith. And then you had the later generation, as well as in some of the other madhahib, they say you're allowed to take a wage, for example, for adhan. One of the reasons is if you don't give people a wage today, there's nobody going to make adhan. Imamah, if you don't give the imam a wage, you're not going to have an imam. People who teach the Quran, they use one of the hadith where the Messenger ﷺ says, the purest of wealth you can earn is that which is earned by the Quran, teaching the Quran, etc. And fiqh would fall under that. So here we'll say that what they call the mutaqaddimun, those who previously came in the madhab, they said not allowed. And those who came later on due to necessity, due to difference in circumstance, etc., as well as in some of the other madhahib, they allowed it. Here we'll say that if a person is charging or taking a fee for Islamic teaching, etc., we must make sure that their intention is correct. So a person should be teaching for the sake of Allah, and whatever wealth came their way, then they should take it. And if they don't want to take it, they can either refuse it or they can take it and give it to charity, whatever they want to do with it. However, the intention must be there. You shouldn't use the deen solely to chase the dunya. Rather, you serve the deen for the deen, and if anything from the dunya had to come to you, then it's permissible to take. And then they tell you you're not allowed to hire somebody for sin. They mention some of the sin. For example, you've got a rave party or whatever it may be, and you're hiring people to come and do haram, etc. Here they'll tell you that that type of sin, hiring for sin, is impermissible and not allowed. And they got a few more masail still, inshallah, which we'll go through. Moving on to Bulugh al-Maram, we reached the last hadith of Babul Miyah, with the chapter of water. Hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where he says, ما قطع من البهيمة وهي حية فهو ميت. Whatever is cut off from an animal whilst it's still alive will be considered maita, will be considered dead. Most of the scholars mention this hadith in Kitab al-At'imah, the book of food, the book of eating and drinking. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentions this hadith to show you that if this organ that's been cut off from a living animal had to fall into some water, it becomes najis. For you to picture the mas'ala, imagine you've got a goat or a cow, or in the olden days, the people of Quraysh, what they would do, the camels, as you know, they have a hump. So while the camel was alive, they would cut the hump of the camel. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that what's been cut off from the animal, even if it's alive, so this camel is alive, he's saying that this will be considered as maita, it will be considered as dead. So you're not allowed to eat it, number one. So for example, a goat, if you had to cut off one of the legs, still alive, here you would not, it would be impermissible to eat that leg. A cow, whilst it's alive, you cut off the tail. Here that you wouldn't be allowed to eat the tail for those who eat it. And if it had to fall in the water, that's najasa falling into it. So that's number one. When it comes to animals which are known as bahima, on 4 legs. Number 2 is, as for animals or creatures which the dead meat of it is halal, for example, fish, or what comes out from the sea, or locusts, grasshoppers, etc. If it's alive and somebody had to cut part of it, that would still be permissible to eat. Why? Because this animal doesn't need to be slaughtered to make it halal. And if you had, for example, a person, let's say they cut a fish and they cut off the head, and the head had to fall into the water, we'll tell you that water will still be clean. Why? Because a fish and whatever comes from the sea, even if it had to die, it's still permissible to eat it according to the majority opinion. As for speaking about the animals, as for those animals which have, for example, fur or wool or horn, for example, because that doesn't have blood in it, they say there's no soul in it, or we could say there's no feeling in it. There's no feeling in it. Here you would be allowed to cut it and use it. So for example, the sheep, when the people take them and they cut off they shave the sheep and take the wool, that wool is tahir and permissible to use, and similar to a horn, for example, a horn of an animal, if somebody had to cut it, similar to any fur, that would all be tahir, permissible to use, and if it had to fall into water, the water would still be clean. So inshallah we stop there. Next lesson, which is on Friday, go over these 15 hadith we've taken so far. Those who memorize them can tell me who memorized, and go over the masail, because I'm going to ask you some revision. And then after water, we move on to aniya. Aniya is to do with utensils, cups and